Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you kindly for stopping by. I do appreciate it. I attended the Samsung launch of the S6 and the S6H, and it was quite a gig, I must admit, at the Sankara. I took a few photographs, I'll put them up. It was under hashtag NextIsNowKE. Robert, who runs the Sub-Saharan African division, said people are hyper now, hyper connected and hyper informed, and I think that's very true. And also I'll put up another photograph that I took. It really was fun to attend, and obviously I'm a big fan. I use a Note 4, and I'm having a keen look at that edge because it looked rather sexy, I must say. Macro thoughts. Mario Draghi was attacked at the press conference, but very sort of sanguine about it, unruffled. I'll put a photograph I took of him before he was attacked, and then one of him being attacked. The European Central Bank had to very briefly adjourn the start of its regular monthly press conference because of that. A protester from Block Up Y movement jumped up from the front row and onto his desk shouting, "End the ECB dictatorship." She covered Mr. Draghi in confetti before being escorted out by Draghi's bodyguards. He was unharmed. And you know, I think Mr. Draghi is a traceur and practices monetary policy parkour. And I'll put up a photograph of someone doing parkour. Parkour is a made-up word, cousin to the French parcours, which means route. Is a quasi-commando system of leaps, vaults, rolls and landings designed to help a person avoid or surmount whatever is in his path, a vocabulary that is to be employed in finding one's way among obstacles. Parkour goes over walls, not around them. It takes the stair rail, not the stairs. Spread mainly by videos on the internet, it has been embraced in Europe and the United States by thrill seekers and martial arts adepts who regard it as an extreme sport. Its founder would like to see it included in the Olympics and part grueling meditative pursuit. Movies like its daredevil qualities. The movements are performed at a dead run. The more efficient and fluid the path they define, the more difficult and harrowing terrain they cross, the more elegant the performance is considered by the discipline's practitioners. I also wrote a piece in September 2012, Super Mario Draghi and his Euro 2.0. That was his beginning of his journey, and he's really given, I think, Europe a great opportunity to get out of this vortex it was in. Home thoughts turned to Jorge Luis Borges, who said, "Being with you and not being with you is the only way I have to measure time." Political reflections. Noam Chomsky, "We're facing a new Cold War," he said. It's serious. I mean, look, Gorbachev agreed to the unification of Germany and even its incorporation with NATO, which is an amazing concession if you look at history. But there was a quid pro quo. NATO should not expand 1 inch to the east. That was the phrase, meaning to East Germany. Once NATO had expanded to East Germany, Gorbachev was infuriated. He was informed by the Bush 41 administration that it was only a verbal promise, it wasn't on paper. And the implication is, if you're dumb enough to accept a gentleman's agreement with us, that's your problem. Then Clinton came in, expanded NATO to the borders of Russia, and now it's gone further, even to Ukraine, which is right at the heart of, apart from historical connections, of Russian geostrategic concerns. That's very serious. And it's getting so little press, so little coverage in the US. Chomsky, not only little coverage, but what there is insane. I mean, it's all about what a lunatic Putin is. There's an article in one of the psychology journals about he must have Asperger's, or some other articles about how he has brain damage. I mean, you can like him or not, but his position is perfectly understandable. And as I've said previously, baiting Putin has simply sent him into the clutches of Xi Jinping, which was an obvious outcome. In many respects, Russia is a paper tiger and detracts from the pivot to Asia. Yemen passed as invaders' graveyard looms over Saudi build-up, which is something I've been saying. From lookouts on the Yemen border, Saudi soldiers can see villages controlled by their Shiite rebel enemies, scattered across a terrain, deep ravines, dry riverbeds that's ideal for ambush. This is the front line, said Hamad Al-Amari, a lieutenant colonel in the border guard at the Al-Musharraq frontier post, where snipers and soldiers with US-made .50 caliber machine guns stand watch behind green sandbags. Saudi Arabia hasn't ruled out crossing that line, sending troops into Yemen to defeat the Houthi fighters it says are tools of Iran. The kingdom is already leading a bombing campaign to halt the rebel advance, yet airstrikes alone may not achieve Saudi goals, and escalating to a ground operation is fraught with risks in a country where foreign armies have foundered. Analysts warn it could bog the Saudis down in an unwinnable war, and I agree with that. It's going to be a tough situation for anybody to move into, said Buford Buff Blount, a retired Major General in the US Army, in a phone interview. The terrain, the political makeup, it's almost a civil war situation, which is never clean, and you don't have a clear front line. It's going to be messy. While Saudi Arabia's armed forces have good equipment and are well trained, their only actual experience was in the 1991 Gulf War, said Blount, who commanded the US 3rd Infantry Division in the 2003 Iraq War. Pakistan has decided against committing ground troops to Yemen in support of the Saudi campaign, and the offer to do so by Egypt rings hollow, Soufan Group, which monitors political risk, said. Without an available ground force to consolidate gains and stabilize the country, it is hard to see what the Saudi coalition airstrikes can achieve. President Gamal Abdel Nasser backed a revolution by Yemeni Republicans against royalists who had support from Saudi Arabia and the UK. He began by sending an expeditionary force of a few hundred commandos in October 1962. By the summer of 1965, Egypt had 70,000 troops in Yemen, according to Nasser's Gamble, a 2012 history of the conflict by Jesse Ferris. For Egypt, the struggle would prove more costly in lives, treasure, and squandered influence than any of its wars with Israel, Ferris wrote. Egypt lost as many as 26,000 soldiers by the time it withdrew in 1967. If I were the king, I would be very reticent about putting my subjects' boots on the ground. Put up a photograph of King Salman with the Qatari Emir Sheikh Tamim at the Al Auja Palace in Riyadh, and then a tweet pic I found was Bafana 3, what the kids in my Sana neighborhood do during a Saudi airstrike, street soccer, and why he loves Yemen. International markets, Norway's oil fund is one of the world's biggest investors, owning on average 1.3% of every listed company in the world, and at 2.5% of every business on a European stock market. An excellent conversation with Christine Lagarde. I found that conversation was from April 9. That is linked on the website. She was speaking at the Atlantic Council. And then the IMF put out their World Economic Outlook, which was termed Uneven Global Recovery, Complex Underlying Currents, and you can say that again. Global growth forecast unchanged at 3.5% this year and 3.8% in 2016. Growth diverges, stronger in advanced economies, lower in emerging economies. Macro risks decreased, but financial and geopolitical risks increased. Overall global growth is forecast at 3.5% in 2015, 3.8% in 2016, broadly the same as last year. But this aggregate number masks the diverse developments. A number of complex forces are shaping the prospects around the world, says Olivier Blanchard, Legacies of both the financial and the euro area crises, weak banks and high levels of public, corporate and household debt are still weighing on spending and growth in some countries. Low growth in turn makes deleveraging a slow process. Large movements in relative prices, whether exchange rates or the price of oil, creates winners and losers. Advanced economies are doing better, but saying that risks remain tilted to the downside. Upside decline in oil prices could provide a greater boost. Further sharp dollar appreciation could trigger financial tensions elsewhere, particularly in emerging markets. Disruptive asset price shifts remain a concern amid low-term and risk premiums in bond markets, as the environment for these asset price configurations, very accommodative monetary policies, and large output gaps in advanced economies is changing. There is scope for surprises and strong market reactions. Geopolitical tensions stemming from ongoing events in Ukraine, the Middle East, and West Africa could generate regional and global spillovers. Currency markets, the euro is at 106.70, had an extraordinary session yesterday, got all the way up to 107.50, I think. Dollar index, when I checked last, was around the 98.50 level. Japanese yen 119.27, Swissy 0.9663 when I checked last. The pound around the 148.55 level. Aussie 0.7749, India rupee 62.365, South Korean won 1089.22, the Real 303.06, Egyptian pound 763.32, and the Rand at 1205.77. Dollar index, I'll put up a 3-month chart that was back down a bit yesterday. Strong rally in currencies like the Canadian dollar in particular. Euro dollar 106.68. I'll put up a 3-month chart, but the whole bond yield now is in an extraordinary place. Portugal sold 3-month debt at a record low interest rate yield, with at least one bid in the auction offering to in effect pay the country's government for looking after their money. Early on Wednesday, the German government also auctioned 10-year bonds at a record low yield of 0.13%. Price gains on German Bunds push yields through January 2024 below zero, driving the average yield to maturity on securities in the Bloomberg Germany Sovereign Bond Index to minus 0.003% at Wednesday's close, which is extraordinary. And Draghi encouraged them by saying that the QE program was not a sprint but a marathon, implying he was going to keep buying. Diageo sales unexpectedly drop as all regions miss estimates. Sales unexpectedly declined in the third quarter as revenue in every one of Smirnoff Distillers' regions missed analyst estimates. Organic net revenue fell 0.7% in the 3 months ended March 31st. Africa, organic sales growth of 8.2% in Africa compared with the 9.2% median estimate of analysts. Gold, when I looked last, was at 1205.74. Crude oil had a huge session, up at $57.22. That's the June contract. The earlier contract hit a contract high for this year of $56.69. The price rise means the US oil market has firmed up into its best shape this year. A lot of people turning bullish. I'm not. Russian currency has gained more than 22% versus the dollar this year, recouping part of its 46% slump in 2015, strengthened below 50 against the dollar on Wednesday for the first time since November. And President Putin is doing a question and answer session right now as we speak. The Russian currency has gained more than 22% against the dollar this year, best performing currency in the world. I like this photograph. Governor Mohammed Al-Hasham, Central Bank of Kuwait, making some opening remarks. The Turkish lira weakened beyond 2.7 against the dollar for the first time on Wednesday, extending this year's decline to 14%, the steepest retreat among 24 emerging market currencies tracked by Bloomberg. Coming to Africa, the CEO of the world's biggest wealth fund turns to Africa for profits. Norway's sovereign wealth fund is pouring a bigger share of its cash into Africa in a bid to capture some of the fastest growth in the global economy. $890 billion fund already in South Africa is spreading its investments to the north and west of the continent in search of opportunities. What's new is that we've crept north, Kenya and Nigeria. We're looking at quite a few West African countries. That's a positive sign. Guinea opposition suspends protests after second day of clashes. We spoke about this already. Protests over the timing of elections would be suspended until next week, a spokesman for the opposition said. At least 6 people were hit by bullets on Monday. The government has denied security forces shot at protesters and called for an investigation. F24 videos tweeted Manifestation en Guinea, and it's quite a powerful image. Sub-Saharan Africa, this is the piece I read through from the IMF. Resilience in the face of headwinds is the headline. And they have Sub-Saharan African growth at a pegged about 0.5% higher for 2015 than the World Bank. Growth in Sub-Saharan Africa remains strong, expected to slow in 2015 in the face of headwinds from declining commodity prices and the epidemic in Ebola-affected countries. Key downside risks include further downgrades to growth in major trade partners, a sharper than expected tightening of global financing conditions, mounting domestic security threats, and policy uncertainty ahead of elections. Oil exporting countries should enact prompt fiscal adjustments, while oil importers' policy stances should strike the right balance between promoting growth and preserving stability. Sub-Saharan African growth for 2014 as a whole remains solid at 5%, albeit lower than the 5.2% in 2013. Growth in South Africa fell from 2.2% in 2013 to 1.5% in 2014 on account of mining strikes and electricity supply constraints. Elsewhere in the region, growth driven by strong investment in mining and infrastructure and by private consumption held up well, especially in the region's low-income countries. Exceptions were Guinea, Liberia, Sierra Leone, where growth declined sharply as a result of the Ebola epidemic, which caused severe disruptions in agriculture and services and the postponement of mining development projects. 2015 growth in Sub-Saharan Africa is projected to fall to 4.5%, a substantial downward revision of 1.25 percentage points relative to the October 2014 WEO, before rebounding to 5.1% in 2016. Oil exporters in the region will be severely affected, with growth in 2015 marked down by almost 2.5 percentage points. Oil importers, Kenya is one of those, is expected to average 4.75%, a downward revision of 0.3 percentage points relative to the October 2014 WEO prediction. In anticipation of possible surges in the volatility of exchange rates and capital flows, countries should also carefully monitor their financial sectors, and those planning Eurobond issues may need to prepare contingency plans. South African all-share, I think, is closed at a record again. It's up 9.74% year to date, it has had a tremendous performance. However, there are lots of challenges, xenophobic ones especially. Put up a photograph of a foreign national holding a machete to protect himself after clashes broke out between a group of locals and police in Durban on 14th April 2015. Nigeria's economy is set to expand 4.8% this year, down from 6.3% in 2014. Angola's will probably grow 4.5%, compared with 4.2% last year, according to the IMF. They also mention that Ivory Coast, Tanzania, Guinea, Burkina Faso are some of the nations in the continent scheduled to vote in 2015. And obviously, the Nigerian result was really something that one can, I in particular am very impressed with. Dollar Rand, as I said, 12.0577 when I checked last, but it's probably strengthened. Egyptian stock market is up just 0.5% year to date. Nigeria all-share up 2.48% year to date. But bear in mind, we've had a stunning rally since the 13th of February. Ghana Stock Exchange is down 1.19% year to date. Kenya and Qatar have inked a deal to establish an international finance centre. Kenya and Qatar have signed an agreement for the establishment of the Nairobi International Financial Centre. Henry Rotich inked the Memorandum of Understanding with the Ministry of Finance of Qatar on the sidelines of the launching of the Chinese Yuan Clearing Centre in Doha. The signing of the MOU with Qatar is to help support the establishment of the NFIC and may also lead to the eventual establishment of a Yuan Clearing Centre in Nairobi, the ministry said. Kenya shilling 93.554, which is in fact a 3-year low, but we can expect it to strengthen a little. Nairobi all share up 5.021% year to date. It edged 0.17% higher yesterday. NSE 20 is up 0.273% in 2015. Tools found near Lake Turkana in Kenya are the world's oldest, this is according to The Independent, the world's oldest tools made by ancestors of modern humans from 3.3 million years ago have been found in Kenya. Stones had been deliberately knapped or flaked to make a sharp cutting-edge, researchers said, according to Science magazine. They are about 700,000 years older than the previous record holder and are likely to have been made by Australopithecus, an ape-like ancestor of Homo sapiens, or another species, Kenyanthropus. About 150 flakes the stones were taken from, and anvils on which the stones were placed while they were struck were found near Lake Turkana in Kenya. Interestingly, it reminded me of the stone hand axes that I found that are there in Oligasai. And I'll put up a photograph of those, and I suspect they're the same types of hand axes that these folks found in Turkana. And if you go to Oligasai, which has been a wonderful place where they've found a lot of old things, particularly stone axes, it's on your way to the hot springs in Lake Magadi. And on that note, I'll put up a photograph of those hot springs because they are pretty special. And I used to love going down there till I had a funny episode with some guy who said he was the ticket man, and he turned out not to be, and we all got a little bit uncomfortable with that. But it is a marvellous place to visit, Lake Magadi. If you ever get a chance, do it.